some information about
I know, thank you.
my program today for you.
Yeah, that's what I saw you.
I also have brochures and stuff. Take a look at that
Great,
information
thank you.
first.
Hi, I'm Vince. We met before, right? I think so.
believe So, yeah.
Yeah,
somebody
nice to
definitely.
see you. Yeah.
Doing this like webinar feature so that it's not everyone's on, so I don't know how many people have joined, so I want to like give them some time to join. And just so you know, all the mics are active in here, so like right now they can hear me talking, but
Okay.
so just keep that in mind. Yeah, that's true. I'll just do this, I'll just do it a couple minutes after. Okay. Oh, that's true. Yeah, yeah. Okay, I think we'll get started. It's a little hard to tell in this format. We're using sort of a different Zoom webinar type format, so bear with us. But we'll get started. It's a couple minutes after 9:30. I want to welcome everyone and thank you to everyone for attending today's workshop. There's a handful of folks here in person, and we have virtual participants as well. The topic and theme of today's workshop is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also referred to as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. The goal of the workshop is to provide an overview of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and guidance on how counties can access potential funding opportunities. My name is Vincent Guttrow. I serve as NACO's Executive Director. Today's workshop is sponsored by NACO's Committee of the Emeritus. The Committee of the Emeritus is a group of former county commissioners who advise and assist the NACO board. The committee was formed with the goal of preserving the institutional knowledge and expertise of commissioners who, due to term limits or other factors, are no longer in office, but who possess invaluable knowledge about county government here in Nevada. This committee is currently chaired by NACO immediate past president, Clark County Commissioner Marilyn Kirkpatrick. Before we get into our presentation, I just wanted to take a few minutes to introduce our panel and highlight the information I'll be sharing. I'm really proud. This is a great panel. We have national experts and Jennifer Berthune, who you can't see because of the format of our Zoom, who resides in Southern Nevada, is our government affairs manager, and she did a great job putting this panel together. So first, I do want to welcome Jessica Jennings, who will be giving an overview of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Jessica works for the National Association of Counties as a legislative director, which focuses in the areas of transportation and infrastructure. In this role, Jessica staffs NACO's Transportation Policy Steering Committee and works with county officials from across the nation to set organizational priorities and policies for transportation and infrastructure issues that affect local governments. Before joining NACO, that's the large national NACO, not our NACO, Jessica was at the United States General Services Administration, or the GSA, where she served as a policy advisor in the Office of Congressional and Intergovernmental Affairs. Prior to GSA, Jessica worked on behalf of counties, local airports, ports, and a variety of transportation-focused organizations in her role as a private consulting firm. Jessica also spent nearly 5 years serving in the legislative branch in the U.S. House of Representatives. Also with us today is the director of the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program at the National Telecoms and Information Administration. His name is Evan Feynman. Evan has a breadth of experience in public service, previously served in multiple roles within government, political campaigns, and as well as the private sector, most recently directing both the Virginia broadband effort and the State Economic Development Agency. Evan received his bachelor's degree from the University of Virginia and his law degree from Washington and Lee University, and has spent time on multiple fellowships across a variety of policy areas. Here in person, here in Carson City, we have Cheryl Fontaine and Jason Cooper from the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. Department of Conservation, that is under the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. They're going to give us some insight on state wastewater and drinking water system grants and funding. Jason is the manager of the State Revolving Fund and the State Capital Improvement Grant Program within the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. He's a certified government financial manager and has been working in the public sector of government, accounting, and finance for over 14 years. Jason and his team of 4 dedicated individuals manage about $555 million in assets for water, wastewater, and stormwater systems. Cheryl Fontaine is the chief of the Bureau of Administrative Services in the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. The State Revolving Fund and Capital Improvements Grant Program Manager are managed by Jason and Cheryl from NF. So also with us is Miles Dixon. Miles is the president of the Nevada Grant Lab. He brings knowledge on navigating federal funding opportunities from a Nevada perspective. Miles founded this nonprofit in 2020 with a mission to help other local nonprofits and government agencies access and administer historically underutilized grant funding. Prior to the Grant Lab, Miles spent nearly a decade in management consulting, supporting government and nonprofit organizations in the areas of public policy, strategy, and organizational growth. Most recently, he served as the chief of staff to Nevada State Treasurer Zach Conine. He's a 3rd generation Las Vegan. Miles is deeply involved in the Southern Nevada community, including serving as chair of the board of directors of Opportunity 180 and previously on the advisory boards for Teach for America in the Las Vegas Valley and the Gwynn Center for Policy Priorities and the William S. Boyd School of Law. It's a mouthful. Miles has a Juris Doctorate from the Boyd School of Law and a bachelor's degree in journalism from the Greenspun College of Urban Affairs, both at UNLV. He's a graduate of the UCLA Anderson School of Management's executive program. So on behalf of NACO and our membership, I do want to thank all of the members on our panel sharing their expertise with us today. And before we begin our program, I just wanted to provide some minor housekeeping issues. We'll take questions at the end of the presentation, and we've set aside plenty of time to do that. So for this, please hold most of your questions till the end, and we are encouraging participants to provide input and ask plenty of questions. And also, this workshop is being recorded. We'll post a link to it to the NACO website. So so if someone from your county was interested in joining but was not available, and also there are resources posted to the NACO website as well, some of the handouts that are provided. So with that, I want to turn it over to Jessica Jennings from the National Association of Counties for a detailed overview of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Jessica, are you ready?
Yeah, ready.
Okay.
Thanks so much. I would have noted to cut down my bio for sure for the next time. Thanks so much for having me. So can you see my slides in the room?
No, not
Could I
yet.
share? I can share my screen then.
Okay.
I think. Let's see. Okay.
Do you have the option to share your screen?
Yeah, can you see the slides there?
Let's see. Yeah. So yeah, if you want
I'll probably have to switch this view. Give me 1 second. Okay, do you see it in like the big format?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So quickly, I'll go through an overview. I'm going to focus mainly on transportation, mainly because that's what I know the most about. And it's definitely, one of the bigger parts of this legislation, which is now law. November 15th last year, President Biden signed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act into law. We've kind of coined it the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law to line up with the administration. So you'll see a QR code at the bottom of the screen. If you take a photo of that, or however it works, you put your camera on it, it will take you to NACO's comprehensive analysis of this legislation. That is far more than just transportation. Of course, there's water, broadband, energy and power, Western water, resiliency. So it's certainly much more than just what I'm going to discuss here today. So I would encourage you to check that out. But the real, I think, resource that's helpful for counties is what you'll find if you scan this QR code. It will take you to our implementation page. And there you will find all sorts of things, which I'll actually go through in just a second. But that does include all the open notices of funding for counties. So quickly, just to break down, this is a $973 billion law over 5 years. You may have heard 1.2 trillion. That's also correct. That's just over 8 years. And you'll see that big blue chunk of the circle there. And that's the funding for DOT. So we're really looking at 550 billion instead of that 973. And that's because this is new money. So you'll notice that if you look up any analyses of these, that's really kind of what people are focusing on, because the other money was really already being spent. So these are new investments that this law makes. And like I said, the lion's share goes to the Department of Transportation. So looking a little closer at that, 284 billion of that 550 billion is for transportation administered through the U.S. Department of Transportation. Counties can access funds basically in 4 ways. The first one, and the main one, being competitively through federal grant programs and other opportunities like that. The second one, we do get sub-allocations based on population from state departments of transportation. However, this doesn't go, as you may know, directly to a county. It goes through metropolitan planning organizations, rural transportation planning organizations, etc. Also can access funds through federal formulas. You may have seen, I think earlier this week, the FY22 transit formula grants were finally apportioned. They were delayed because of the FY22 appropriations bill being delayed, which I will talk more about just a second. And finally, that fourth way are those loans and loan guarantees. So if you're familiar with TIFIA, which is a loan program through the Department of Transportation, or WIFIA, which is a very similar program administered, I believe, through the EPA for water projects. So I want to first, I'm sorry, that says, okay, perfect. I have made several copies of this and I'm always paranoid that I haven't updated it, but everything's good. So I want to first talk about some of that money that goes to the state DOTs before I talk about the competitive opportunities. So you may have seen that, I believe back in January, about 5.5 billion was apportioned to state DOTs through a new bridge formula program. The good thing about this and why it's important to counties is because it has this 15% off system bridge set aside. So I was looking at the stats for Nevada, and you actually far below the national average of what counties own for off system bridges, which is like 66%. In Nevada, it's about 31%. But this bill does make a historic investment in bridges. And obviously, you know, off system bridges are those that don't frequently get funding, and that's because they're off the national highway system. So in addition to that 15% set aside, there's also a new incentive that was added by Congress that your state Department of Transportation can invest in these local bridge projects at a 100% federal cost share. And we think that's a huge incentive. We're really excited about that. And we think, you know, it's good information to be armed with as you do deal with your state DOT. So each state receives at least 45 million annually. This is the off-system bridge set aside, which will make at least 6.75 million available annually for off-system bridges. This is in addition to funding that already came through the Surface Transportation Block Grant. So the total for Nevada in FY22 is 9.5 million. So to tell you how that stacks up, it's like 360% higher than the bridge off-system bridge resources that were available in FY21. So that kind of shows you the significant increase for these kind of assets, which again, really excited to see. So just a couple more formula programs that do go to state DOTs but are sub-allocated. The first one, certainly the most well-known, the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. Things I would bring your attention to is that there are two new bands through which money is distributed, which is between 49,999 and 200,000, and then 5,000 and 49,999. So before it was 5,000 to 200,000. And this will basically help us, you know, ensure that the state DOT is building projects in an equitable way throughout the state, and give us more data, you know, to show one way or another. So you'll see this is FY21 and FY22. It rose about 10% from last year. In Nevada specifically, there's $60.6 million available for sub-allocation, which is about an 11% increase from last year. And in doing my analyses of doing these presentations, I've looked at several different states. They're all about 10, 11% higher. One more state DOT program. This is a new one. It's called the Carbon Reduction Program. It's also distributed through those same population bands we just talked about. However, the projects are restricted to those that reduce transportation emissions. You know, you could almost say that this is in conflict with the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. But nonetheless, excited to see a new program that does give us some local control. So this is the really exciting part, I hope, of the presentation. We have a funding table for counties. And again, you will find this at the QR code. I'll make sure that Vincent has the link, etc. We have a table. I have a printed version here, but we have a table online that has every funding opportunity that a county is eligible for in some way. That might mean like a local public agency is eligible, you know, transit recipients, etc., designated recipients, stuff like that. But if a county can access the money, it's in the table. It's much bigger than the little snippet you can see here. We have everything from the agency, the sub-agency that administers the program, The funding level over 5 years, what type of funding is it? Is it competitive? Is it formula? Is it those loan and loan guarantees we talked about? What does the program do? What are the, what's the description? We have federal cost share information. We have special eligibility requirements. So if a county is eligible, but only certain counties, that information is there. And of course, that very valuable, how does a county access this program? All that information is in this table, so we hope you'll check it out. The longer of the two that you can see here are these little cards, and those pop up in a different section of the table of the website to show you that they are open for applications. So as soon as the agency releases this funding, we'll have it right here, and you can click directly from our website to the open notice where you'll be able to apply. So right now, there's about $7.5 billion available. That's just through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and competitive opportunities that counties can access. And then in addition to that, like I mentioned just a moment ago, the FY22 appropriations bill, it had several different impacts on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It prevented DOT from standing up many new programs that were funded in a certain way. So US DOT is now able to move forward with all of those. And just to kind of give you a picture of the funding, kind of how they work together, in addition to the appropriations for FY22 at DOT, the law also appropriates funding to the tune of about $37 billion in FY22. So this table here is intended to demonstrate that using some major programs from different parts of DOT. So those RAISE grants, you may know them as BILD or TIGER. They are actually open right now through April 14th. Last year, they got $1 billion. Under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, they got $1.5 billion this year. And then the omnibus appropriated even more money, $775 million. 2.3 billion is now available in FY22, and that's about 130% higher than last year. That last column kind of tells the story. The percentages are certainly nothing to scoff at, especially those CRISI grants. Those are Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvement grants. We don't have an open notice for those yet, but you'll see about 335% higher than what they had in FY21. And also just other agencies, not just DOT, were plussed up. So other programs through DOE and many others. I don't have it in front of me right now. So here's the good stuff. These are open notices. This is not all of them. There are, I believe, 9 open right now. All but 2 are through the U.S. Department of Transportation. The Water Smart Small Scale Water Efficiency Project. There's another one that is focuses on drought resiliency that I'm sure would be relevant to the Nevada counties. Those are limited to 19 Western states, which of course Nevada is one of those. And then you can just kind of see here the opportunities that are out there. Now you can look at this, you can look at our table, and see what these programs do, what they require, et cetera, and kind of make a decision. And the table is also intended to also be a resource to let you know what's coming. So thinking about the upcoming notices that we're going to see funding for, and this is all because of the FY22 appropriations. That's what we needed to really get many of these programs going. Some of these programs listed here are for states, but the majority of them are also open to counties. And you can kind of see May is going to be a really big month for notices through DOT. Also some more throughout this summer through September. Like I mentioned, the CRISI grants, looks like those are going to roll out in August. So just something to be aware of. And then, how do you access the funds, right? So I think they mentioned, Miles, that you have a very, you're doing the Lord's work with the technical assistance and support for locals, because so often it's just so difficult to even get off the ground, or you're discouraged, or it's overwhelming. Name many factors that affect local governments in applying for funds. So These three things are just three I highlighted. There's many more than this. The US DOT Rural Opportunities for Using Transportation for Economic Success Initiative. They have a toolkit for applying. It walks you through. Of course, the Local and Tribal Technical Assistance Program is available, and DOT's done a really good job of putting out their own resources. I'll make sure you get these slides, and you'll be able to just click on these icons and it'll take you there. But the combined multimodal NOFO that came out recently, I just want to mention quickly before I wrap up. I think DOT finally heard us, and they actually streamlined the application process. So you could apply for the new mega grants program, Infra grants, which you're probably familiar with, and then a new rural surface transportation block grant program using one application. So we're really excited about that, because the applications can just be at an enormous cost, and they're very complex. So we're excited to see that they are listening to us and trying to make it a little easier to apply. There's also 2 transit bus grant programs that you can apply for using just one application. So that's really the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take questions at the end. And again, I'll leave you with this QR code and hope you can check it out when you get a chance. So thanks.
Thank you, Jessica. So one of the things in this law is broadband funding. There's been I know a ton of talk about that, and so our next panelist, Evan, if you could go.
Happy to. Thank you very much, Jessica. That was really good. I learned a lot of stuff I didn't know about the way our colleagues over in transportation are running this. So that's really cool. I will go ahead and share my screen and endeavor to share what I am supposed to and not anything else. All right, so y'all should see my slides now. And here we go. So IIJA, you've heard about that. There are 4 big buckets in the broadband and connectivity space that you should be aware of when it comes to programs authorized by the Infrastructure and Jobs Act relative to NTIA. There's also a lot of stuff at FCC, USDA, and a series of other bond funding opportunities. But I really want to talk to you primarily about what we're going to be operating. I, as you've heard, am the director of the Bead Program. That's a $42.5 billion program. BEAD stands for Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment. I'll point out when we get into that acronym has the benefit of being pronounceable, but is a little upside down when it comes to priority. There's also a digital equity program, nearly $750 million. We're plussing up the tribal program that was already operating to the tune of $2 billion. And there's a middle mile program, which is $1 billion. We'll talk about middle mile in a sec. And then FCC is going to connect to this a number of different ways, but is also running a very large and well-funded subsidy program. When we talk about BEAD, really what we're talking about here is a new model wherein rather than running the federal government support for expansion of broadband infrastructure centrally out of DC, we've empowered states to within some very broad guidelines, tailor programs that make the most sense for the capacity of the state, the underlying geography and settlement patterns of the state, and the policy preferences that the states have. There are a couple of things that we're going to need to do. The first is that all unserved locations must be served at the conclusion of this program, and there must be a plan to do that. So an unserved location is any home or business location that currently can't get 25 megabits per second download and 3 megabits per second upload. On top of that, all underserved locations, everybody under 100 megabits per second download and 20 upload is going to need to have their network improved. Once those are handled, then any remaining funds can be used to support community anchor institutions and other digital equity programming. One of the things that you definitely want to think about is we're not going to build anything under 100/20 absent some very unusual circumstances. Similarly, there's a 25% match requirement. That's not at the state level, rather that's on a subgrantee by subgrantee basis. And folks who are building infrastructure using this program are going to need to have a low cost offering. I'm going to run through the other programs, and then we'll come back to BEAD a little bit. Digital equity is a really critical priority of the agency and the administration. Oops. This funding pool is small only in the context of modern infrastructure spending. It is certainly not the case that a $3 billion program is to be scoffed at. In particular, this presents a major opportunity to make sure that you've got targeted vulnerable populations taken care of within the context of even already served by infrastructure locations. And especially we want to think about low-income folks, elderly folks, disabled folks, veterans. And this is going to have kind of three phases. There's a planning period. We're going to upskill capacity, and there's going to be a competitive grants period on digital equity. The tribal program has already been running, but it's been dramatically expanded. There's a bunch of new money that's coming out. We're going to have a lot of eligible entities here, really means states and territories. The timelines have been extended under the prior program, and folks are going to be able to spend more of their resources on planning. We know that it's very hard to get these things off the ground. And then we're going to make sure that we're able to wisely allocate funds instead of creating a perverse incentive to spend down money on a project that's completed or gold plate a project that's completed rather than simply roll it into other better projects. Middle mile. So this is an interesting area, both of the entire policy area around broadband as well as programmatically. Middle mile is not so much a geographic description of broadband as it is a business model description of a broadband network. A middle mile operator, a middle mile network, is a network that carries data to and from a backbone, a major internet connection, and to and from a network operated by a customer-facing ISP. And so you could imagine that's the divided limited access state-run highways are middle mile, and then the local streets are last mile. That said, a middle mile network can come all the way to a home or business, provided what they're doing is they're leasing access on their network to a customer-facing last mile entity. These are going to need to be built out to support existing networks. We're going to make sure that you check at least 2 of these 5 boxes on here. Y'all can read. And we got to make sure that we're going to be able to continue to operate these. And this is true for all of our programs, frankly, but that these networks are going to be built so that they operate into perpetuity in an effective fashion. We've got a bunch of upcoming webinars and guidance, but I want to come back to BEAD because, frankly, it's my baby and I know a little bit more about it. The way that this is going to work is each state and territory office is going to generate, well, first it's going to raise capacity. And they're going to do that hopefully through strong support from the governor's office and the legislature. We also are able, as soon as the program launches, simply by submitting to us a letter of intent, $5 million from the program will be distributed swiftly. That in federal government speak, that still probably means a couple of months, but a check gets out to the states, and that $5 million is going to go a very long way to making sure that the state office has the capacity to run a several hundreds of millions of dollar federal program. That state office is then going to need to collaborate very closely with local governments. And I want to emphasize, I, prior to this job, worked in Virginia state government. We made it a requirement that any construction that was happening in any county or city had the support of the county or city government. I believe that's a best practice, and that's what we're going to look for as we roll this program out. We don't want to be building stuff that doesn't meet the needs of the community. Local governments are an absolutely critical partner. The second thing I want to make sure that it's really clear about is that there's a really wide distribution of underlying economics around these programs. So, a mile of broadband infrastructure costs the same amount to lay in downtown Las Vegas as it does in a rural area, a rural and agricultural area. The difference is the amount of revenue that they can get from that, right? You can pick up a ton of customers in the middle of a city. Very tough to pick up enough revenue from subscribers to make back your capital investment. That's the whole reason that the private sector didn't solve this problem on their own. What we're going to need to be very careful about is making sure that the amount of funds that come out are right sized so that we don't create windfalls for ISPs in the areas that are marginally economically viable, and that we preserve enough money on a per state basis to make sure that there are the funds there to get to everyone. I want to be really, really clear again that this program has as its core goal, all other goals fall by the wayside, beyond the core goal that all Americans are going to be online, will have the opportunity to get online at the conclusion of this program. There will no longer be people unserved by broadband infrastructure when the BEAD program concludes. That's a goal that is shared by me and my team, by Alan Davidson, our agency head, by Secretary Raimondo, all the way up to President Biden. I'm told, I don't go to the White House, but I'm told that President Biden was talking specifically about this just the other day on their cabinet call. And really, this is one of his key items, and he's pushing very hard to make sure that we don't leave anybody behind, that it's time for us to be done with that. There's a lot of synergy between the 4 programs that exist at NTIA. Additionally, there's a lot of synergy across other IIJA programs. And so in particular, I want to highlight for you the electric charging program coming out of the Department of Transportation. Every single one of those electric vehicle chargers has to sit on a broadband network. There's a lot of opportunity to collaborate between your 2 programs there. Your governor's office should have both a key point of contact on the broadband programming and an infrastructure coordinator. And that could be the same human being, it might be different, but it's really important that it exists. We are going to be really forward leaning when it comes to technical assistance and support. My plan right now is to have a federal program officer. We're going to come up with a better title for them than that, but that's what they are on the books federally. A person who works for NTIA who's on our team in every single state capital. And their job is going to be a co-leader, shoulder to shoulder with whomever it is that runs the Nevada broadband program. And they are going to be a resource to support the development and capacity building in that office, to be a contact for local governments, for industry actors, and for political leaders and stakeholders to come back up through our team and make sure that what they need, they get. We're also going to have a dedicated team of technical assistance inside of our DC team a strike team that we can deploy anytime there's an issue. We're going to roll out a lot of guidance. I wish I could tell you that we're going to have an entire really robust toolkit for you in mid-May when the notice of funding opportunity launches. We are not. Please don't panic as a result of that. The simple fact is NTIA was not a large organization prior to the creation of these programs, and we're still staffing up really aggressively. Nobody's going to get behind. The only deadlines that people need to be really aware of in the short term are letters of intent, which need to come in relatively quickly, and basic digital equity planning, which needs to be done relatively quickly. Past there's going to be an opportunity to engage with the program over the course of the summer as we roll out additional guidance. And that guidance is going to be plain language. We're going to have the legal documents related to the program. We have to do that, but we're also going to have plain spoken, clear advisory documents that are going to tell you what to do and what not to do. That's also the way I operate and the way everybody who's going to be on my team operates. We're not going to retreat into legalese. We're not going to pretend that we can't interpret our own documents. We're going to tell you what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what's a good idea, what's a bad idea, and how to maximize your outcomes to make sure that you've got a good plan. Over the course of the program, FCC is going to come out with a map that is much better than existing problematic data sets that will purport to show every served and unserved location on a location by location basis across every state. There's going to be an opportunity for the states to challenge, for both states and ISPs to challenge that map. That's going to be really important because ultimately the number of locations on that map are going to drive the amount of top line funding out of the $42.5 billion y'all get in Nevada. That said, I don't think spending an inordinate amount of time on that challenge is particularly wise. To the extent there are errors in that map, those errors are going to be similarly distributed across the whole country. And if everybody spends a boatload of time correcting the errors in every state, the allocation is going to wind up being exactly the same as it would have been if nobody corrected it, right? So, there is value in making sure it's right, but there is risk in over allocation of effort on tracking down every single misidentified location. The reason for that is there's going to be a second exercise by which projects are selected by the state office. And that exercise is informed by, but does not have to be governed by, the FCC map. The FCC map was a snapshot in time based on a bunch of data that was reported into them. We are going to do our level best to recognize that map exists, but permit the creation of projects that are necessary to get everybody online, regardless of the mix of locations identified by that FCC map. So you got to be aware that there's flexibility in the implementation of the program. That state program is going to be developed in the context of a 5-year plan that's going to be updated each year. And the state will then be making sub-grants of our grant to the state to projects. Those can be regional projects, those can be sub-locality projects. And once we've got, as I said, you can envision the BEAD program as consisting of 3 buckets, each of which needs to be completely filled before resources can flow into the next. We have to get every unserved person online. We have to improve network connectivity for every underserved person. Resources that remain at the far end of that, after those 2 buckets have been filled, can be used for other digital equity and community priority projects. The last thing I'll say is it's going to be really important to bring additional resources to bear. This funding is, well, 1, has a match requirement, but then 2, there are going to be instances in which it simply is not, you're not going to find an ISP taker where your densities get very, very, very low. And that's where other resources can and should come to bear. And those can include Rescue Act dollars, whether they be state or local Rescue Act dollars. Those can be philanthropic dollars. Those can be general funds from any level of government. And those can be, really any other interested party. We in Virginia actually established a philanthropic and development effort, and we got a bunch of corporate social responsibility and foundation money to help supplement, where the matches weren't adequate on a locality by locality basis. So that's a really high level overview of the programs we're offering, and I want to leave room for questions and also for Miles. So thank you very much, and I look forward to talking more.
Thank you, Evan. We'll turn to Carson City here. We have a couple individuals from the state, Jason and Cheryl. So I think Jason's going to do the talking, and he'll discuss another component of this law. So go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Jason Cooper, and I want to say I'm very happy and excited to be here today and part of this discussion. Thank you very much to NACO staff and the Committee of the Emeritus to host this and bring this on so we can have a very good conversation today. Joining me today is Cheryl Fontaine, my Bureau Chief, and we're here to talk to you a little bit about the water and wastewater funding that's coming through the bill. I know a lot of you have this near and dear to your hearts with some of your areas in your communities and have needs out there. Let me provide you with some numbers and how this looks when it comes to funding water and wastewater within your communities. So within the bill, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, $50 billion is going towards water and wastewater alone across the country. Most of that is flowing to the state revolving fund programs, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. In Nevada, that's managed by me through the Division of Environmental Protection under the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. And what that means for Nevada is that there's approximately $420 million that Nevada will have access to be able to address water, wastewater, and stormwater needs over the next 5 years. Bill is in addition to my normal annual appropriations that come out of Congress for both of these programs as well. And that $420 million is the total number. It includes my annual appropriation that's estimated for the next 5 years, along with the funding from BIL. Now, just to give you a quick magnitude size of what that means for our program, the Clean Water Program has been around for 33 years. The Drinking Water Program has been around for 23 years. And in that time period, Nevada has managed to accrue $572 million in assets. So we're getting $420 million in the next 5 years alone. So there's quite a large amount of money flowing to us in this case. And I am pleased to also announce today, with the governor's support and the interim finance committee meeting that occurred yesterday, my staff is growing. I only have, there's 5 of us, including myself right now, trying to manage all of these programs, and we've just been given a permission to hire 3 more people. My program has just lightning changed since November 15th, and we have been trying to keep up with this pace. I have a list of things too that we are still working on as well to try and ensure that the money goes to the appropriate uses, the best uses, and we are not delaying anything on our end in getting the message out. I want to share though with you that the $420 million that I've mentioned is an opportunity, but it's not a guarantee. I say that because I must demonstrate to EPA that Nevada has a need for this money. We do that through our priority lists that we have to develop. Both programs have a priority list that is required to be developed. And I use that priority list to submit the grant applications showing EPA that I have a demand. I have a need for these funds. If I do not have enough projects on that list that meet the grant's conditions, then my grant is subject to reallotment to other states. So federally, $50 billion will be spent, but what state will still determine who that is. And it's my job to make sure that the message is spread as much as I possibly can, which is why I'm participating in many of these kind of workshops now to get the word out about this opportunity and the need. Additionally, there's a timeline on this as well for me. I have to apply for the first year's allotment no later than this time next year, or I could potentially lose the first year's allotment of funding. And I'll get into what those numbers look like in a minute. So we currently have our priority lists open. We have been actively informing everyone the importance of just listing your projects on the priority list. Getting on the priority list for either program does not commit you to take any money. It just tells us what your need is. It tells us what the demands are out there. And then that even helps our office figure out how we can best serve the communities. I will then put together what we call an intended use plan that goes along with that list to apply for the grant. And that is a dynamic report. We don't leave it static year over year. I try to look at what the systems are, what the projects are on that list, and how can we best assist those systems move forward with the funding. So we're constantly needing to hear from water systems directly. And there's again, only now 7 of us, but still only 7. There are 602 water systems in the state, and there's at least 200 wastewater systems that are monitored. I can't call them all. So we're doing what we can to try and ask folks to let us know what the needs are. And again, over long-term period of time, even if you don't plan on starting your project this year, put it on my list so I've got something I can use to plan for future years. We want to keep the funds flowing to Nevada. We want to make sure that Nevada receives its fair share of federal funding that will help us address water and wastewater needs in the state. Over half of my money from this new BIL program is going to be required to be distributed as principal forgiveness funding. And I said principal forgiveness, some of you know what that means, some of you may not. My program is a loan program. I'm a bank, basically. I'm not allowed to grant money out, but I am mandated by the federal grants to distribute a portion of the grant as additional subsidy. which could be in the form of principal forgiveness. And that basically means we just forgive the debt as soon as you draw the loan. So there's no repayment at all and no interest that you pay on it either. The goal of those funds, though, is really meant to help the most underserved parts of our community, the disadvantaged sections and blocks of our areas. In the drinking water program, it is currently written into the state regulations that there is only one way that is defined, and that is by using the median household income from the census data or by doing a census income survey of the community. So we are currently looking at the drinking water regulations to amend them. And we are going through that process as we speak. We have posted on our website a first listening session that we've done on that. But our goal is to expand it to include some of these other things, these other factors, such as if there's that's pockets of communities rather than an entire community. We're looking at communities that are at a poverty level. We're looking at communities that don't have health insurance, they're underserved. We're trying to understand what the needs are out there. And so we're really looking at this broadly to try and make sure we're assisting those communities as best as possible. Again, we're seeking your help, though. We're called to action, if you will, to have a better understanding about what the needs are out there. So then we know we're crafting these things in an appropriate manner so that we can keep these funds flowing to the state. In the clean water program, though, we have what we call the affordability criteria rather than a disadvantaged status. And I have the ability to write that in the intended use plan when I write the next one, which is currently in draft. I will be expanding that one as soon as I possibly can get it written to include a lot of these other areas as well that go well beyond just a median household income percentage. So again, stay informed on what we're doing. Help us understand what the needs are. Please provide any feedback you have on that or any additional suggestions that we might be looking for or missing that would help us understand what the needs of the communities are. To be able to make sure that the majority of this money continues to flow. As I mentioned at the beginning, I needed to show demand, but that also includes these subparts. So in the $400 million, if half of it has to go to a disadvantaged community or an underserved area, even if I've got a $400 million water project on my list, if I don't have 200 million of it going towards a disadvantaged community, I still don't have enough projects to apply for the grant. It's very complicated. And I'm not going to ask you guys to understand all that. That's my job. I just want to make sure I share that information with you. So you're helping me get the most information that I can from all of your needs. We are doing outreach and site visits, but it would still be best for you to contact us to let us know about any communities within the counties that you know of that really need some assistance, really need some help. In addition to all of this, though, we're not just talking loans here. My grants are able to provide what we call technical assistance. Technical assistance in this case goes beyond just the technical components of operations. It goes into managerial and financial as well. If there is a water system that doesn't know how to operate, they don't know how to do a budget, they don't know where their system assets are mapped, they don't have a map, they don't have an operations and maintenance manual, or the board needs to be trained. There needs to be understanding about what the open meeting laws are. Just basic operations for water systems, and now I also have that in the wastewater side as well. My grant can also be used for those needs as well. I would like to know what the needs are, if you have any, to let me know, and then I can start getting that coordinated with contractors. This is a no cost to the water system activity that we can pay for directly through the grant to those systems. So this is an opportunity for them to really build capacity, especially if we have a lot of staff turnover. We know there's a lot of concern over the workforce development in water systems out there, and board members as well. And so if additional training is needed in those areas, let us know. We'll get some things going together with our vendors that can provide these. They're nonprofits that go out and do this work on a daily basis. So as far as some of the projects that could be funded, we've got on our website a lot of resources that include all sorts of different types of projects. I wanted to highlight a few for you and then also get into some of the special kinds of projects that's eligible for funding in the bill specifically. In the wastewater program, our clean water SRF is pretty broad. It allows us to fund not just a wastewater treatment plant, but we can also do septic to sewer conversions. If a fire has recently come through the area and burned out a hillside that could then cause flooding or erosion control or issues there, we can actually replant the hillside. We could reline a landfill if it's leaking and it's getting into the groundwater. We have lots of opportunities to fund things in the clean water program. In the drinking water program, we can fund a lot of rehabilitation, replacing asbestos cement pipes, redoing treatment, installing treatment, putting in treatment or new systems where a system doesn't currently exist. So you've got an area of your county that does not have, they're all on private wells, they need to go on to a centralized treatment. We can install one. They just have to be existing. We cannot fund the growth. So a developer would have to really still take care of that. But though there's some options there, there's some resources there for you if you have any of those needs. The BIL money is coming out with special grants that are designed to help treat for emerging contaminants as well. PFAS, PFOAs, those things that have been coming up lately, perfluoral and polyfluoroalkyls, are something that they want us to focus on, but we can also fund things such as pesticides, disinfection byproducts, pharmaceuticals, biological toxins, waterborne pathogens, microplastics, anything that's starting to emerge that's not currently regulated either in drinking water or on the wastewater side. We can fund it on the wastewater to help mitigate the drinking water as well. So those are projects that I can fund. I will share with you at this moment, I have yet to have a project present itself to me that I could use to apply for those funds. If we don't get any projects forward, we'll lose 8.7 million in the drinking water program. And it's only 462,000 the first year in clean water. It bumps up to $1 million after that for these emerging contaminants pieces, but it's 100% principal forgiveness. There isn't a requirement here for this to be a loan. So again, if you've got any of these projects, I need to hear about them because right now I'm not. And I'm kind of delaying the applications to later this year. EPA really wants us to move these fast and furious if we can. But I want to give a little bit of time to try and get some of these projects lined up, give folks time to send them over to us so we have those projects to be able to move forward. There is another special grant that's coming through the drinking water BIL funding, and that is specifically for lead service line replacement. That alone is $32.7 million each year for 5 years consecutively. 49% of it is going to be principal forgiveness to a disadvantaged community. I have had some communities tell me that they have lead in their community system. And we are working on trying to get them put onto the priority list so we can get funding applied for with that. One of the things that I'll mention for you though, is that as soon as I'm able to get some projects lined up with this, then that will also trigger my ability to bring in some additional funding to be able to provide some technical assistance for areas that might need to do those surveys to find out if you even have lead. Because I know there are some communities out there that don't know if they've got lead or not. The lead funding is very broad on what I can fund. It's not just the service line, but I can go into the house area too, past the meter. I can replace the curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and I can also replant the front yard if we need to. So there's a lot of money that we can do with this. Congress has said we want the lead out of the ground, but I need to know where the lead is. Most of the Western states feel that that's not really much of a Western problem, but we also know that there are areas in Nevada and other parts of the West that were settled during time periods that still were putting lead in the ground and have never addressed these pipes. Once you put it in the ground, it seems to vanish, goes off the radar. As long as the water flows out of the valve, when you turn the faucet, everything's good. This is the time to get that fixed and to address it. And don't hold back. If you already know about these things, even if it's $60 million, let me know. I want to just mention that real quick, and then I'll try to stop here because I don't know what time it's been, but I do want to share that my office does a lot of partnering with a lot of other funders as well. If you're dealing with a water or wastewater project, please, please, please let me know. If you've got anything going on, I work with USDA, I work with CDBG. My program even has the ability to issue bonds to leverage my program for more funding. So if the numbers I'm telling you today isn't really large enough for you, don't let that stop you either. Please bring me everything you got and let me figure out how I can help you. We'll sit down together, we'll do a funding package. I'll work with you on your timelines, but we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep the dollars flowing to Nevada. And the biggest message I can leave with you today is that if I don't have those projects to demonstrate to EPA, I'll lose them to another state. And I don't want that to happen for our systems. And with that, I'll say thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. And I look forward to any comments or questions.
Great, thanks, Jason. Miles, are you on?
Hey,
Our
good
last
morning,
analyst,
everybody. Of
Miles. Yeah, hello, thanks for joining us again.
course. 1 second, let me make sure I'm sharing correctly here. Quickly confirm you can see that, correct?
That's great, thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me begin by saying kudos to NACO for organizing this conversation. I think this is the very sort of content and exchange that we need more of here in Nevada as we seek to make the most of federal resources, whether they are every single day annual federal grant resources that we historically underutilize, or major opportunities like IIJA. I think it's this sort of information exchange and coordination, especially across jurisdictions, both vertically and horizontally, that we need more of. So really grateful for the opportunity to participate. I'm gonna try to talk a little bit more quickly than I planned so that you all have time for questions. And with that, let me jump in and say that for my few minutes, I'm going to talk less about IIJA and more about federal grant funding in general, specifically with a view to how are we doing here in Nevada so that we can understand some of the key challenges or opportunities that sit ahead of us as we think about how to make the most of this federal grant package. So let me begin at a really top level. As all of you may know, and like it or not, that federal domestic spending amounts to about $800 billion a year. And that's just in regular years. So as we add on things like the CARES package or the American Rescue Plan, and now IIJA, that $800 billion a year of base funding significantly grows. And at the moment is at a place that we've never seen it as a country. And every single year, those dollars flow. And now with recovery, relief, and reinvestment investments, we'll see it spike. What's the money intended to pay for? It pays for contracts and grants to state and local governments, tribes, and nonprofits so that they can fund things like personnel, capital acquisition, and so on, really to touch virtually every aspect of American life, whether it's the arts and affordable housing, or at the other end of the alphabet, workforce development. When we think about federal funding, it's really hard to understate the significance that it plays in funding local community assets and services, and notably, not just funding it in entirety, but really balancing the costs of these sorts of things with local government, with state government, with philanthropy, and so on. So it's of vital importance for our communities, our counties, our cities across Nevada, and really across the country. At the same time, as some of you may know, Nevada doesn't have the best track record when it comes to getting what we think of as our quote unquote fair share. So here we see some data from federal funds information for the states, which tracks the flow of dollars primarily to state government recipients. That's on the left and bottom. You see that Nevada ranks in the bottom 20% in 6 of the 10 largest funding categories. So there you see the 10 largest funding categories. That's the 200 largest programs across the country. And that's Nevada's per capita funding. And that's back to federal fiscal year 2019. So pre-COVID, just an ordinary year. For some of you, you may be looking at Nevada 54th in education. Yes, it's possible to be 54th, even though there's 50 states, because we factor in territories as well as DC. And so again, this is the per capita federal grant investment that we see across major categories in Nevada. Up on the top right, you see the results of a recent study from the Gwynn Center for Policy Priorities, which looked at per capita funding in federal fiscal year 20, again, pre-COVID, so this removed any of the emergency aid. Nevada was 45th in the nation, and we're off by almost $800 per person per year just from the national average. And so to underline the notion of national average really quickly, I want to focus in on the fact that most federal funding, formula and certainly competitive, aligns from a distribution perspective to where there's most need. So things like highest levels of unemployment, or maybe lowest access to high quality education or healthcare, usually federal funding from a criterion standpoint is targeted around communities of highest need. Here in Nevada, we lead the country often, unfortunately, in categories of highest need, yet we're the anomaly state that leads in need and trails in funding. The reason I bring that up is because it's incredibly important at this moment in time as we look at IIJA, as well as continuing to think about how to make the most of the remaining American Rescue Plan Act dollars. We really have to take a moment, and I appreciate Vincent mentioned in my overly long bio that I will also amend that I'm a third generation Nevadan. So this is a tough conversation, I think, for all of us to have. But I think it's really important to recognize that we have a track record that doesn't necessarily indicate that we are really well positioned to make the most of federal funding opportunities going forward. And so really taking a moment to say what's not working, especially at this critical juncture, is vitally important, at least from our view. So what we're trying to acknowledge here is that historically we've underperformed, and I'm going to talk about why in a moment, but really thinking about, we went into both the crisis as well as the rebounding economy and opportunities that abound with IIJA, et cetera, understanding that our system underperformed on an ordinary Tuesday, even before this. And so that system won't fix itself overnight, and it's critically important to understand what's not working so that we can start to fix it now. So moving on, what's been holding us back? 5 huge challenges. I want to note that these are not challenges that I thought about and wrote on a Post-it note, but instead these are challenges that have been articulated in report after report after report for almost a decade here in Nevada. So we actually understand in a pretty finite amount of detail around what our challenges are. And so I want to really quickly highlight those, and then you'll see these replicated as we talk about. So what can we do about it? First, grant processes, especially in state government, are antiquated. When we think about the way that our state takes federal money in and administers it, it doesn't match from a timeline standpoint, at the very least. It doesn't match the speed with which federal agencies want us to work. There's lots of opportunities to improve that. But I want to really underline, and we'll talk about it in a moment again, is thinking about the processes it takes for your agencies, your community partners in the nonprofit or local government sector, the cities. What are the processes that it takes to make a decision to apply for funding, to press submit, if you're awarded, to start spending those dollars and getting them out on the streets? Really thinking about process. Not our processes, but how our processes relate to the federal requirements of doing this well. Second, insufficient investment in grants, personnel, and technology. Jason, I'm excited about your 3 new FTEs. It's probably exactly what you need. Maybe you need more, but across the board, what we know is that we've understaffed federal grants infrastructure. We've also failed to invest in the technology that would have moved us forward. So it's really important, again, just to stand back and recognize that many of our agencies, as they exist today, and certainly as they went into the crisis 2 years ago, lacked both the positions on the org chart as well as the adequate professional development and training opportunities to make sure that the folks who are doing what is pretty complex work have the training and the resources that they need to do it successfully. Too little communication across the hundreds of agencies. I know all of you are in local government, and so you know about this experience. We just have too little communication and coordination across agencies, both horizontally and vertically, as well as among the sectors. So nonprofit, for-profit, and government. We can talk about this for a long time, so I'll touch on it in a second, but I just want to acknowledge that I think it's actually things like this. And so again, kudos to NACO and to all of you for participating today. This is the very sort of convening we need a lot more of. And the excellent information that the other panelists shared is exactly what you need right now, or what I think we need right now. So well done to NACO for organizing us. Not enough consensus on the priorities. So talk about this in a moment, but I want to flag the need to really understand what do we want to do as communities, as counties, as cities, so on. That helps us choose the best possible opportunities to propose in these grant programs. Finally, inability to match funds. It is a real challenge. I acknowledge that. I want to talk about that in a moment again, but it is a real problem. I think part of that also is a process issue. And so the rigidity with which we may be operating traditionally our budgets and the approval processes by which you may move money from one category to another category within your budget, really thinking about maxing out flexibility so we can address that. So I want to move on to what can you do right now? One, I think one of the most important things to do is increase your internal capacity, communications, and coordination. I think a really effective way to do that is create a working group. Think about all of the different folks, whether it's creating a broadband or a water system or a highway. Think about your programming staff, your public works folks, your finance, your intergovernmental relations. Form a working group within your organization that pulls cross-sector to make sure that you have the right people around the table so you get the right amount of information as quickly as possible and you can move forward as a group. Also, functionally, just think about if you have the right staff. Do you have enough people? This is really complex work, as you've heard, and it moves quickly. It's not going to work if everybody's understaffed. And I know it's really hard to talk about staffing right now. I get it. I do want to flag ARPA, I think very appropriately provided cities, counties, recipients with broad discretion, including the ability to increase staff to respond to relief and recovery. So look to your ARPA dollars, as well as maybe look to things that you can use ARPA dollars to spend on that maybe were already in your general fund, free up some money and invest in your internal capacity to communicate and coordinate so that you don't miss more funding opportunities. Second, identify community needs and opportunities. I think one of the easiest ways you can do that we all can do that, is think about all of those different plans that we've written over the last 5 or 10 years that ultimately landed on a shelf. Maybe it was because we couldn't figure out how to fund it at the time. Maybe we didn't really understand or have enough support to move a project forward. Things have changed. And so really thinking about what ideas are already on the shelf, they've already been vetted, maybe there's community consensus so that we can move quickly. Some of that may be plans that you've created, others may be regional plans, or maybe they're statewide plans. GoEd and other organizations have helped facilitate. Go back to those plans. A second, think about community engagement. I know that that can also be tough for folks, especially understaffed, but really think about an opportunity to go and make sure that you as leaders and organizations serving constituents really understand what your folks see as a need. I would imagine you've already done a lot of this work, but just a quick reminder, going and asking a second time, or maybe for the first time, it's a good thing to do right now. We only have one chance to get this right with IIJA. Finally, I want to note identifying and aligning your processes. Some of this may be really obvious. How do we make a decision as an organization to apply for a grant? Some is less obvious. Do we have a procurement process that allows us to go and hire the grant writers or the folks we need for due diligence to put together a good application? So some of this, again, more obvious, some is less obvious. But I think really stepping back and saying, what are the various steps that we're going to need to do as a county to effectively put forward a really high quality grant application, especially on the competitive side, as well as if we're fortunate to get an award, what's it look like to take that money in and really quickly put it to work so that we can maintain the time requirements and the performance requirements of our federal partners. So thinking about process a lot. Let me note really quickly here, one of the biggest challenges that frontline staff report when we're talking about federal grants is not having enough information about federal grant opportunities, and two, not feeling like there's support from leadership. And I know that may sound surprising, given that we have so much information out there, both on the internet from organizations like NACO and so on, about federal grant opportunities, but really taking the time to sit down as a team with your teams and talk it through. One, gives them more opportunity to get information, to ask questions and answers, but really critically, to see that leadership supports grant applications and are willing to move process barriers that have historically, maybe we use them every day and they make sense for us every day. But the procurement process that makes sense for us every day, maybe with state general funds, won't necessarily make sense in the context of moving federal money, especially on an expedited timeline. So making sure that they see you and hear the information and feel the support is really critical. Let me also really quickly, and I'm going to end here, note some of the key opportunities to, I think, really get out in front here. One, map the grant funding. So I think that the information that you heard earlier and the mapping from NACO is a fantastic tool. I think this sort of stuff, like the table Jennifer illuminated, go and visit it. So many folks do this work, whether it's Bruce Katz at Drexel University, Brookings Institute, our federal partners, as well as organizations like NACO. There's a decent amount of information this is already done for you. Pull it down and really understand what's available, who's the applicant, when action is required, how applications and awards work. So is it competitive or is it formula? And really, really think about what the performance requirements are. I think the second piece here is key as well. Evan mentioned this as he talked about broadband. Understanding what the federal agency's priorities are is absolutely vital. So specifically, in a lot of IIJA, we see requirements around climate, equity, placemaking, et cetera. If you put together a program proposal that is not addressing both the explicit, in that there are priority points included in an application, or the implicit, i.e. it's all of the talking points you hear from every federal agency and every announcement about grant opportunities, if your proposal, especially on the competitive side, is not responding to the priorities of the agency, the likelihood that you're going to see an award goes down significantly. I already talked a little bit about thinking about cross-sector and cross-jurisdictional collaboration, so I'm not going to belabor that anymore. I do want to note BIL Funding toolkits, really thinking about what are the other resources you have, local and state general fund, philanthropy, et cetera. Also, don't forget private financing, bond financing, et cetera, especially on the transit side. Sometimes you may need to be able to articulate a full capital stack as part of your application. And in other cases, at a local level, for you to make the most of these dollars, you have to start talking to the private sector sooner than later around what it looks like, for example, for transit-oriented development to come to fruition. So really thinking about the broader capital stack, I think, is vital. Finally, be bold, be inclusive, and be flexible. This really is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Nevada, for your communities, for your organizations. And so think both small and practical, but also make sure you're thinking about a few really big ticket ideas that maybe, but for this program, would never be funded. Be inclusive, talk to partners about it, and be flexible, especially with your own processes and your own partners, to make sure that you can get to a result and don't get stuck in all of the regulars. Finally, we have a lot to gain by getting our fair share here in Nevada. We've foregone this opportunity for a long time, but especially with IIJA and all the other resources on the table, we really have to stay focused on what it's going to take to get there. And with that, I will stop and say thank you again so much for having me. It's a pleasure to join you all this morning.
Thanks, Miles. I appreciate that. Thanks to all of our panelists. I hope you can hear me. So we have about 10 to 12 minutes for questions, and we'll try and maneuver this technologically wise. So I believe there's an ability to ask a question if you're participating virtually. I don't know if we have any questions here in person for any of our panelists. So if you are participating virtually on the webinar, you can use the Q&A function to ask a question, and I'll read them here in the room. We'll go from there. We'll call for a question one more time. Is there any in the room here in Carson City? Sorry. Well, I have a question. Thank you all again. I think this was a great panel and I really appreciate it. So one of my, where am I? So, yeah, so my question is actually around the broadband space. So Evan, thank you so much for all that information. And I know there's been a huge investment. I know the governor announced the huge investment from the state. So I'll just share a little bit of background about Nevada and then sort of why my question is what it is. But we have residents in this state. I'll use Lincoln County as a very good example, who literally, I think the latest number for them is about 20% of their population does not have access to broadband. It was an issue during the census when we went to an online census. So based on the goal of making sure that everyone is served by broadband, is there what's the outcome if that doesn't happen, I guess would be my question. I'm not asking for a penalty, but sort of what's the next step? Do you know, has there been conversations around that? What's the thought around that?
Well, so first, we're not going to let that outcome occur. The state has to submit a plan to us for our approval that will ensure that first, everybody unserved gets served, second, everybody underserved gets up to modern broadband standards, and then third, any funds are spent beyond that. If that plan doesn't include a way to get the job done, which can include, finding alternate sources of funds if there's a shortfall. I don't think there will be. Please don't hear me announcing that now, but I'm saying, we're gonna have, the point is we got to get that done by hook or by crook. And I'm gonna have a staff person in Nevada who wakes up every morning and goes to sleep every night thinking about this, alongside the leaders in your governor's office and alongside all the local leaders that I know care about this. We're going to get it done in every single state. Or we're not going to do anything, right? We're not going to approve a plan that doesn't get it done. And so, it's a big enough carrot that the incentive is there to figure it out. The second thing I'd say is there are a ton of models, and we got it done largely. It's still doing, but we got it done in Virginia prior to the IIJA money coming down. And I maybe should have shared that at the outset. We used ARPA dollars, local dollars, philanthropic dollars, and match. And Virginia is going to have every single location served by the end of calendar year 2024, almost entirely with fiber to the home. We have greater population density in Virginia than y'all do out there, but we had a lot less to work with in the way of resources than folks will have under this act. And so, there are a lot of different strategies to get the job done, and we'll be collaborative with you. And where you've got a special situation, we're writing a lot of, I talked about those guardrails, and you can imagine kind of a 12-lane highway, and states get to pick their path. We've got some gates, they're locked. The secretary's got to unlock them, but we've got some gates in those guardrails too. If there's something funny about our rule set that doesn't accommodate getting that job done in Nevada, we're going to change the rules. We're not going to force compliance with rules that don't work for y'all.
Great, thank you so much. No, I appreciate that. And yeah, we definitely want to be part of the conversation. I think there's definitely been some involvement here, at least this, and I know, look, counties and states don't always coordinate super well. I think that's probably a role for NACO to help facilitate that coordination. We try and always present that intergovernmental partnership, but I think it'll be critical here. So definitely appreciate those comments. We do have a question on the chat. So Stephanie Elliott has asked, what is the best way to connect with members of the panel, join the subscription list, or be part of the conversation? So I think that sort of revolves around being informed about grants. So I don't know if Miles, if you want to take this one, or if others have ideas, but yeah.
Sure, I'm happy to take a pass. I was just going to drop our website in. We have a partner enrollment form, which our real goal in that is helping folks learn about federal funding opportunities. So we're in the process of building a grants portal that will combine, hopefully, if we can get participation from everybody, that will actually combine funding opportunity announcements from federal, local, and state government sources, which, as some of you may know, feels like a currently Byzantine process. So we're trying to pull all of those together in a single place and give you a terminology set, or give especially nonprofits a terminology set that's easier to find grants that actually meet their missions. So if you sign up on our website, you'll start get weekly opportunities to learn about federal funding. Most of that is federal right now, not just the pass, or excuse me, not inclusive of the pass-throughs. You'll also get invitations for us. We host pretty regular capacity building workshops that are taught by folks like CPAs to really talk about compliance and control side, folks to help you think about need statements, all that good stuff. So we do that. I will say, I think that nothing beats NACO. I think Brookings, Pew, there are some really fantastic national organizations. I'd flag the new Drexel University Metro Finance Lab. There are some awesome resources that make it really easy to learn about federal funding opportunities and what are out there. So I'll drop some of those in the chat. And I'd really encourage you to sign up for listservs. I know right now it feels like more information is not always what you want, but some of these folks are doing a great job of making it really easy and accessible and helping you get the info you need.
Thank you. I think Jason wanted to comment here in Carson City, so go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to mention, for anyone who wants to stay in the loop on everything from the state level for water and wastewater, Office of Financial Assistance, we have an email service on our website you can sign up for. It's listed in the information that we've sent out, but it's also at ndep.nv.gov. That's the main NDEP website for Nevada, under water, and then under infrastructure financing. And in there is where you're going to find the links to sign up for our emails that are sent out whenever we have any notices about funding or anything like that available. And this also includes funding that comes through the state grant program. That's separate also from the SRFs that we manage.
Great, thank you. And it looks like Jessica dropped in the chat also for folks. There's a National Association of Counties funding table for counties as well, so that could be helpful. Tons of resources. I know, like Miles mentioned, sometimes too many. So, well, we have time for, I think, maybe one more question, and then we got to wrap it up. We actually have another NACO meeting right after this. So I don't know if anyone has any other questions. Go ahead and use the Q&A feature. And if there's not any other in the room, I will give it just a second for the online feature. So, okay. I'm not seeing any typing. Great. Well, again, kudos to all the folks who attended, and very much thank our panelists. I guess one advantage of having a virtual option is that we get such a nationwide perspective on things, and I think that's super great. We wouldn't have been able to do that, I think, in the past. So thank you everyone again for attending, and thanks to our panelists, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you.